The night I almost died, I was standing in my mother-in-law's kitchen holding a glass of iced tea she had just poured for me. I remember the condensation dripping down the side of the glass, the way she smiled at me with those perfectly white veneers, and the strange bitter taste I tried to ignore because I didn't want to be rude. I was 7 months pregnant with twins, and I had no idea that the woman standing 3 feet away from me had been planning to destroy everything I had for the past 6 months. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand how a girl from a small town in Ohio ended up fighting for her life against the most dangerous person she ever met, her own mother-in-law. I met my husband Ryan at a pharmacy conference in Columbus when I was 26. I had just finished my Doctor of Pharmacy degree at Ohio State and landed a position at a hospital pharmacy in the suburbs of Cincinnati. Ryan was a medical device sales rep, charming, tall, the kind of guy who remembered your coffee order after hearing it once. We dated for a year and a half before he proposed, and I thought I had hit the jackpot. Good job, kind eyes, close with his family. That last part, close with his family, should have been my first red flag. Ryan's mother, Diane, was a retired registered nurse who had worked in obstetrics for over 20 years. She lived in a large colonial house in Indian Hill, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Cincinnati, paid for entirely by the trust fund her late father-in-law had established before he passed. The trust was worth roughly $8 million, and it was structured so that the money would eventually pass to Ryan and any biological grandchildren upon Diane's death. Diane controlled the distributions during her lifetime. She decided how much went where and when. That kind of financial power over a family does something to a person. It turns love into leverage. From the moment Ryan introduced me, Diane made it clear I was not what she had envisioned for her son. She never said it outright in front of Ryan, of course. She was far too sophisticated for that. Instead, it came in small cuts. A comment about how pharmacists were really just glorified pill counters. A raised eyebrow when I mentioned my student loans. A casual remark at Thanksgiving about how Ryan's ex-girlfriend Meredith came from such a lovely family. Ryan's younger sister, Caitlin, was a carbon copy of her mother, only louder. Where Diane used a scalpel, Caitlin used a sledgehammer. She once told me at a family barbecue that I should probably skip the potato salad if I wanted to fit into my bridesmaid dress. I wasn't even a bridesmaid. I was the bride. But I loved Ryan, and I believed that love was enough to navigate the sharp edges of his family. So, I married him in a small ceremony at a vineyard in Napa Valley that I paid for almost entirely myself because Diane said she couldn't justify spending trust money on what she called a modest affair. I swallowed the insult. I smiled. I told myself it would get better once we were officially family. It got worse. The first 2 years of our marriage were a slow education in how a narcissist operates. Diane called Ryan every single day, sometimes twice. If he didn't answer by the third ring, she would call me and ask in that syrupy voice of hers if everything was all right, if Ryan was upset about something, if perhaps there was trouble in the marriage. She inserted herself into every decision we made. When we bought our first house, a modest 3-bedroom in Anderson Township, Diane showed up uninvited on move-in day with a set of curtains she had picked out herself. She walked through every room making suggestions that were really instructions. When I politely said I had already ordered curtains, she looked at Ryan and said, "Sweetheart, I just want your home to feel warm." He looked at me with that helpless expression I would come to know so well and said, "Just let her help, babe. It's not a big deal." It was always not a big deal. Every boundary I tried to set was not a big deal. Every overstep was just her being a caring mother. Every cruel remark was just a joke I was taking too seriously. Ryan had been trained since childhood to keep Diane happy at all costs, and he could not see or refused to see that his mother's love came with conditions attached. When I found out I was pregnant with twins at age 29, I was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. I told Ryan first, obviously, and he cried happy tears and held me so tight I thought he might crack a rib. For one beautiful weekend, it was just us and our secret and the impossible joy of 2 tiny heartbeats on the ultrasound screen. I wanted to keep it between us for the first trimester, just to be safe. Ryan agreed. Then he told Diane 3 days later. She called me within the hour. Her voice was ice wrapped in silk. "Twins," she said. "That's quite a surprise. You must be overwhelmed." I told her I was happy. She paused for a long time and then said, "Well, we'll need to discuss the trust arrangements." I didn't understand what she meant at the time. I would understand very soon. The trust fund stipulated that biological grandchildren of the original grantor would become beneficiaries upon turning 18. Twins meant 2 new beneficiaries. 2 new people who would dilute Diane's control over the money she had come to see as exclusively hers. In her mind, I hadn't just gotten pregnant. I had staged a hostile takeover of her financial empire. Things escalated quickly after the pregnancy announcement. Diane began questioning whether the twins were really Ryan's. She never accused me directly. Instead, she would make insinuating comments to Ryan when she thought I couldn't hear. She mentioned that I had attended a pharmacy conference in Chicago alone. She pointed out that I was friendly with a male colleague at work. She planted seeds of doubt with the precision of someone who had spent decades manipulating her own family. Ryan started coming home quiet. He stopped putting his hand on my belly when we watched television. One night I found him sitting in the dark in the nursery I had been decorating, and when I asked what was wrong, he said, "My mom thinks we should do a prenatal paternity test. Just to be sure." I felt like I had been slapped. I told him absolutely not. I told him his mother was poisoning his mind. He said I was overreacting, and that his mom just wanted to protect the family. Protect the family. That phrase would haunt me for the next several months. At 24 weeks, I started getting sick. Not normal pregnancy sick. I was exhausted beyond anything I had experienced, dizzy, nauseous, in a way that felt chemical rather than hormonal. My OB ran blood work and said my liver enzymes were slightly elevated, but nothing alarming yet. She told me to rest, drink fluids, and reduce stress. I tried, but every Sunday dinner at Diane's house left me feeling worse. I didn't connect the dots. I was a pharmacist, trained to recognize drug interactions and toxic reactions, and I still didn't see it. That's how good Diane was. That's how completely I trusted that a former obstetric nurse, a woman who had spent her career delivering babies, would never harm a pregnant woman. I was wrong about her in a way that almost cost me everything. The Sunday dinners were Diane's theater. She would cook elaborate meals, always insisting on making my plate herself because I was eating for 3 now, and she wanted to make sure I got enough protein. She always poured my drinks. Always. Looking back, it was so obvious. But when you're exhausted and pregnant and your husband is pulling away from you and your mother-in-law is the only one who seems to care whether you've eaten, you don't question the glass of herbal tea. She slides across the counter with a smile. At 28 weeks, I collapsed at work. Right there behind the pharmacy counter. My legs just gave out. My coworker Priya caught me before I hit the floor and called an ambulance. At the hospital, the emergency physician ran a full panel and pulled my OB in for a consult. My liver enzymes were now dangerously elevated. My kidney function was declining. The babies were showing signs of stress on the fetal monitors. The doctor looked at me and asked me point blank if I had been exposed to any unusual substances, any herbal supplements, any medications that weren't on my chart. I said no. I said I didn't take anything, except my prenatal vitamins and the iron supplement my OB had prescribed. Then the toxicology results came back. They found traces of pennyroyal in my bloodstream. Pennyroyal is a plant extract that has been used historically as an abortifacient. In high enough doses, it causes liver failure. In a pregnant woman, it can trigger miscarriage, organ damage, and death. A retired obstetric nurse would know exactly what pennyroyal does to a pregnant body. She would know the dosage, the timing, and how to disguise the bitter taste in a cup of strong herbal tea. The doctor stared at the results and then looked at me. He said, "Someone has been poisoning you. I need to call the police." Those words changed my life. Not because they scared me, although they did, but because in that single moment, every confusing thing that had happened in the past 6 months suddenly snapped into focus with horrifying clarity. The Sunday teas, the insistence on making my plate, the escalating sickness, the liver enzymes. Diane hadn't been caring for me. She had been slowly killing my babies. The hospital moved fast. They admitted me to a private room, started IV fluids to flush the toxin, and put both babies on continuous monitoring. The on-call attending contacted poison control. A detective from the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office arrived within 2 hours. He was calm, methodical, and he asked me to walk him through every interaction I'd had with Diane over the past 3 months. I told him everything. The teas, the prepared plates, the escalating symptoms after every Sunday dinner. He took notes without expression, and then asked if there was any physical evidence. And here is where my story diverges from the version Diane had planned. Because 2 months earlier, after Diane had made a particularly vicious comment about the paternity of my babies, I had installed a small security camera in the kitchen of our house. I had done it because I wanted to document the verbal abuse for a potential custody dispute, not because I suspected poisoning. But that camera had captured something I hadn't reviewed yet. 3 weeks before my collapse, Diane had visited our house while Ryan was at work and I was at the pharmacy. The camera recorded her entering our kitchen, opening the canister where I kept my loose-leaf tea, and pouring a small amber bottle of liquid into it. She stirred the tea leaves with a spoon, closed the canister, wiped the spoon clean, and left. The entire thing took less than 4 minutes. I told the detective about the camera. He sent a uniformed officer to our house to retrieve the footage. When he watched it on his laptop in my hospital room, his expression changed for the first time. He closed the laptop, picked up his phone, and made one call. Within 90 minutes, 2 detectives were at Diane's front door in Indian Hill with a search warrant. They found the amber bottle in her medicine cabinet. The lab confirmed it was concentrated pennyroyal oil. They found a second bottle in her purse. They found internet search history on her tablet that included phrases, "I cannot bring myself to repeat," all of them related to inducing miscarriage in late-term pregnancies without detection. Diane was arrested that night. She was charged with 2 counts of attempted murder, 1 count of assault on a pregnant woman, and 1 count of administering poison with intent to harm. In the state of Ohio, poisoning a pregnant woman carries enhanced penalties. The prosecutor made it very clear that Diane would not see the outside of a courtroom for a very long time. Ryan showed up at the hospital the next morning. He looked like he hadn't slept. He stood in the doorway of my room, staring at the fetal monitors beeping steadily, and he said, "She told me you were making yourself sick for attention. She said pharmacists sometimes do that because they have access to medications." He wasn't apologizing, he was explaining. He was still, even now, with his mother sitting in a county jail cell, trying to give her version of events a foothold. I looked at him and said, "Get out." He didn't move. He started to say something about how this was his right. These were his children too. He deserved to be here. The nurse, a woman named Deborah, who had been checking my vitals every hour, stepped between us. She told Ryan in a voice that left absolutely no room for negotiation that the patient had requested he leave, and that she was calling security if he was not gone in 60 seconds. Ryan left. That was the last time I saw him in person for almost a year. The next 6 weeks were the hardest of my life. I remained hospitalized on bed rest while the medical team monitored my liver recovery and the baby's development. The pennyroyal had done damage, but my medical team caught it before it became irreversible. My liver function slowly improved. The twins' heart rate stabilized. I lay in that hospital bed day after day, staring at the ceiling, replaying every meal Diane had made me, every cup of tea she had poured, every smile she had given me while she fed me poison. I felt stupid. I felt ashamed. I was a pharmacist. I should have recognized the symptoms. I should have tested the tea myself. I should have trusted the instinct that told me something was wrong months ago, instead of pushing it down because I wanted to believe my husband's mother was not a monster. Priya visited me every day after her shift. She brought me crossword puzzles and Thai food from the place near the hospital, and she sat with me while I cried. She never once said "I told you so," even though she had told me months ago that Diane gave her a bad feeling. My parents drove down from Toledo every weekend. My mother slept in the chair next to my bed more nights than I can count. My father spoke to lawyers. My best friend from pharmacy school flew in from Denver and helped me draft a restraining order against both Diane and Caitlin, who had been calling the hospital trying to get information about my condition. The hospital blocked their calls and flagged their names at the front desk. Only people on my approved visitor list were allowed on the floor. Ryan was not on the list. The twins were born at 36 weeks by emergency cesarean. A boy and a girl. I named them Noah and Lily. They were small, just over 4 pounds each, and they spent 2 weeks in the NICU. But they were alive. They were healthy. They were mine. I held them skin to skin in the NICU, their tiny bodies warm against my chest, and I made them a promise. I promised them that no one would ever hurt them. That I would build a wall around their lives so strong that the people who had tried to destroy them before they were even born would never get close enough to cast a shadow. I filed for divorce from my hospital bed. Ryan contested it. He wanted joint custody and access to the twins' trust fund inheritance. His attorney argued that Diane's actions were not Ryan's fault, and that he had been manipulated by his mother just as I had. My attorney, a woman named Sandra Chen, who specialized in high-conflict family law, dismantled that argument in approximately 4 minutes during a preliminary hearing. She presented the security footage, the toxicology reports, the text messages between Ryan and Diane in which they discussed the paternity test strategy, and a voicemail Ryan had left Diane 2 weeks before my collapse in which he said, and I will never forget these words, "Just handle it, Mum. I can't deal with this anymore. Just handle it." His pregnant wife was being poisoned, and he told his mother to handle it. The judge granted me full custody, a protective order, and an emergency freeze on the trust fund, pending the criminal trial. Diane's trial lasted 11 days. The prosecution presented the security footage, the toxicology evidence, the search history, the pennyroyal bottles, and expert testimony from a toxicologist who explained in precise clinical detail exactly what Diane's poison would have done to my babies if it had not been detected when it was. Diane's defense attorney tried to argue that she was treating me with a natural herbal remedy and had no idea it was harmful. The prosecution countered with her 22 years of obstetric nursing experience and her internet search history. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty on all counts. Diane was sentenced to 18 years in a state correctional facility. Caitlin, who had helped her mother research the pennyroyal online and had purchased the bottles from an herbal supplement store, was charged as an accessory and received 4 years. Ryan was not criminally charged, but the family court judge noted in the custody ruling that his complicity, while not criminal, represented a profound failure to protect his children. He was granted supervised visitation twice a month. He has attended exactly 3 visits in the past 2 years. The last time, he sat across from Noah and Lily at a supervised visitation center and spent most of the hour staring at his phone. My children barely know his face. The divorce was finalized 8 months after the twins were born. The trust fund was restructured by the court to remove Diane as trustee. A neutral financial trustee was appointed to manage the fund until Noah and Lily turn 18. I didn't take a cent of it for myself. I didn't want Diane's money or her family's money or anything that connected me to that house in Indian Hill. What I wanted was a clean start, and that is exactly what I built. I went back to work 4 months after the twins were born. Priya had covered my shifts and fought with hospital administration to hold my position open. I worked days at the hospital pharmacy while my mother helped with the babies, and at night, after Noah and Lily were asleep, I studied for my board certification in toxicology. It took me 14 months of brutal, exhausting, lonely work, but I passed the exam on my first attempt. I became one of the youngest board-certified toxicology pharmacists in Ohio. Within a year, I was consulting for law enforcement on poisoning cases. Within 2 years, I had opened my own forensic toxicology consulting firm, Clearview Analytics, operating out of a small office in downtown Cincinnati. I hired Priya as my first full-time employee. We took on cases involving suspected poisoning, drug tampering, and pharmaceutical fraud. The demand was staggering. It turns out there are far more people being quietly poisoned by people they trust than anyone wants to admit. Today, Clearview Analytics has 12 employees and contracts with law enforcement agencies in 3 states. My office is on the 14th floor of a building overlooking the Ohio River. Some mornings, I stand at the window with my coffee and look out at the city, and I cannot believe this is my life. Not because it's luxurious, although it is comfortable, but because 3 years ago, I was lying in a hospital bed wondering if my babies would survive, wondering if I would survive, wondering how the person who was supposed to be my family had tried to destroy everything I loved. I saw Ryan once, about 6 months ago. I was picking up Noah and Lily from preschool, and he was sitting in his car in the parking lot. He didn't get out. He just sat there, watching through the windshield as I buckled the twins into their car seats. Noah was telling me about a drawing he made of a rocket ship. Lily was singing a song she learned in class. I could feel Ryan's eyes on us, but I didn't look back. I didn't wave. I didn't feel anger or sadness or pity. I felt nothing. And that nothing, that complete absence of emotional weight from a man who once had the power to break me, that was how I knew I was free. Diane writes to me from prison. She has sent 11 letters in the past 2 years. I have not opened a single one. My attorney reads them and files them as documentation. Sandra tells me the letters alternate between apologies and threats, between claiming she was trying to protect her son and accusing me of destroying her family. The cognitive dissonance of a narcissist is staggering. She poisoned her grandchildren and still believes she is the victim. Caitlin was released early on good behavior. She moved to Florida. She has made no attempt to contact me or the twins, and I hope it stays that way. Ryan's supervised visitation rights technically still exist, but he stopped showing up. His attorney sent mine a letter 6 months ago asking about modifying the custody arrangement. Sandra responded with a detailed summary of his visitation attendance record. We haven't heard back. People sometimes ask me if I regret marrying Ryan. I used to say yes. Now I say no. Not because the marriage was good. It was a disaster built on my naivety and his cowardice. But without that marriage, I wouldn't have Noah and Lily. And without that terrible, harrowing, nearly fatal experience, I wouldn't have found my purpose. Every case I take on at Clearview, every toxicology report I file, every victim I help, exists because a retired nurse tried to poison her pregnant daughter-in-law with pennyroyal tea, and a pharmacist was just barely smart enough to survive it. Last Tuesday night, I was working late at the office, reviewing lab results for a case, when I heard a knock on my door. It was Noah and Lily. My mother had brought them up from the lobby because they wanted to show me something. Noah had drawn a picture of our family. Me, him, Lily, and my mother. 4 stick figures under a big yellow sun. Lily handed me a red crayon and said, "You draw too, Mommy." I sat down on the floor of my corner office on the 14th floor, and I drew a flower next to the stick figures. Lily said it was the best flower she had ever seen. Noah said it needed a bee. So I drew a bee. The office was quiet. The river glittered outside the window. My children were laughing, their voices echoing off the glass walls of a company I built from nothing. And I thought, this is what safety sounds like. Not silence. Not the absence of danger. It's the sound of your children laughing in a place where no one can hurt them. It's the sound of doors that lock from the inside. If you are listening to this and you recognize any part of my story in your own life, if there is someone in your family who makes you feel small, who controls you through money or guilt or fear, who smiles at you while quietly tearing your world apart, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not crazy. You are not overreacting. And you do not owe your loyalty to someone who is using it as a weapon against you. The hardest thing I ever did was walk away from the family I married into. The best thing I ever did was build a family that is actually safe. Thank you for listening. If this story meant something to you, please leave a comment and tell me your experience. Have you ever had to cut someone out of your life to protect yourself or your children? I want to hear from you. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Remember, your peace is not negotiable. Protect it like your life depends on it, because sometimes it does.